This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hello and welcome back to my art channel. So today I have something a little bit different for you guys. It is a digital painting portrait study. As you can see, it's quite stylized, and I just had this little snippet of working with my hand, but overall this video is going to be a screen recording, which makes more sense because I wanted to show you the entirety of the process, which was actually pretty short. I think it was about an hour or less. It was like 57 minutes or something was the total time that it took for this digital portrait study, and I just want to show you all the steps that I went through as I was working on it. So before I continue, I'm just going to take a quick minute to tell you about today's sponsor, Squarespace. As an independent artist, I have to juggle a lot of different things and jobs, and a portfolio website upkeep isn't something I can spend a whole lot of time on, which is why I really like using Squarespace. Once the initial setup is done, maintenance is super quick. So every time I have something to add to my portfolio, uploading an image and rearranging my gallery to look good only takes a couple of minutes. The automatic image scaling feature makes the gallery neat very quickly, and I can always go into the design settings to adjust the thumbnail sizes to my liking or change it to slideshow mode if I feel like it. Squarespace has multiple modes of editing pages as well, which makes it very versatile, so you can just add a block of text or an image or move things around intuitively without any need for custom codes. If you want to start building your own website, head over to squarespace.com and get started right away for free. You can play around and see how easy it is to make a professional looking website for yourself. Once you put together your website and are ready to launch, you can go to squarespace.com/cosmicspectrumart and get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. And now back to the video. One of the reasons I like to do studies once in a while is obviously to continue to evolve my skills and to make sure that I don't become stagnant, and sometimes doing something out of my comfort zone, such as this type of painting study, is super helpful and helps me get out of a rut, which is actually something that I'm feeling right now. And so I'm thinking that I might get back to doing these types of studies for a little while. But yeah, so one of the reasons why I decided for this one to be digital is because at the time, this was some time ago. I don't remember when I did this one exactly, but I actually did include it in my new art book, Prism. In case you haven't heard about it, there is a link in my description. But yeah, so I was really into digital art at the moment, and as you guys probably know, I like to switch back and forth pretty frequently between digital and traditional art, and I became really into these stylized portraits that I've seen a bunch of artists do on Instagram. Nobody in particular comes to mind. Maybe I'll try to look something up later, but basically there are some artists on Instagram and on YouTube as well that do mostly portrait painting studies, but they're very, very stylized, and I just find those so attractive, and it's pretty different from what I usually do because I'm very, very dependent on line work. And as you can see, because of that, I still started the study off with a line drawing, and that's something I always do. I just don't really know how to do art any other way, so that is my go-to approach for any beginning stage of a drawing or painting in this case. But after that, I have seen a couple of tutorials now and then, or like people's process videos, and Lorish is one of them, where she also starts with line work, and she usually knocks back the initial sketch quite a bit just to make it like less visible and be able to paint over it. So that's kind of what I did in this case as well. And yeah, it was a very kind of haphazard process for me because I don't really know exactly how to approach doing stuff like this in terms of a strict step-by-step type of way, which is what I usually tend to lean heavily upon. A sort of very strict step-by-step process is how I approach most of my other artwork, and the processes that I use is stuff that I have just developed over the years through trial and error and a lot of time. And in this particular case, I didn't have something like that, so I was just working on one area here and there. Obviously trying to keep the big picture in mind, but also I kind of just started working on one area, one little thing at a time, basically. And yeah, it was a very grueling process for me, because as some of you guys know, or as probably a lot of you guys know who have tried painting, there is a lengthy, ugly stage that you have to just kind of deal with when it comes to painting like this. And I was stuck in that stage for quite some time. In fact, this is usually where when it comes to painting, I just give up and don't feel like putting any more time and work and effort into a piece, because I feel like it's just not going anywhere and it looks terrible. And this is exactly the reason why over my long art journey, I have always steered clear of this type of painting approach to my art. And that is also the reason why I want to try it once in a while, just to, you know, shake things up and do something a little bit different, which always helps me to learn something new. But yeah, in this particular case, I'm really glad I just stuck it out, and just even focusing on a little bit, like a little area to render it out a little bit more, like I did here with the lips and the lower nose portion, really helped me to stay the course. Because if I didn't put the time into that earlier on in the piece, I feel like I would have probably just gotten really frustrated and just left it. So yeah, I don't know how people actually have the patience to make it through a lengthy, ugly stage of a painting, because like I mentioned earlier, this was actually pretty quick. It was about an hour, so that's not very long at all. And even then, I was having a hard time focusing on the painting, because it was taking a while to get it to a decent looking stage. And I think by this point, it started to come together a little bit. I was really experimental when it comes to the types of brushes that I used. I have a ton of brushes in my Photoshop. I think most of them came from this one brush pack called Kyle's Megapack. Back in the day, several years ago, you used to be able to just purchase it as a whole. So that's what I did all those years ago, and I'm not sure if you can still do that. I know that since then, Kyle Webster, the guy who made these brushes, he has collaborated with Photoshop, and I think a lot of his brushes actually come with a program. I don't know if it's the entirety of what I purchased back when it was still available for like separate purchase, but in any case, I still to this day use those brushes a lot, and that was a great investment for me for sure. And some other brushes that I use are from the free Ahmed Aldoori Photoshop brush pack that you can find on his Gumroad. Super easy to find. Hopefully I'll remember to put a link into my description. But yeah, those two sets of brushes are super versatile, and you can pretty much find anything you're looking for. I think with Photoshop getting too crazy about brushes is like, I don't know, even with the hundreds of brushes that I have, I only end up going back to just a handful of them. So there's that. That's just maybe my personal preference. But yeah, I try to utilize a lot of texture if I can with brushes, especially with the hair, because I didn't want to go and paint I didn't want to be super tedious about the hair, so I just went for big shapes for the most part. And as you can see, I took a lot of liberties with the shapes here, especially when you compare it to the original portrait, which, by the way, I got the reference photo from Studio Graffiti, and that's one of my favorite resources for art photo references. They have some amazing, fantastic photo packs, and I'll also leave a description. I'll also leave a link in the description for that. And yeah, that's where I got the portrait, and there's quite a variety in that pack, and I actually did some studies of some of the other portraits that were included, and maybe I'll share those later. But yes, So as you can see at this point, I am polishing out some of the smaller details, and for the most part I did want to focus on the face, so I didn't even really venture that much further below the neck, because there wasn't really that much going on there, so I just wanted to keep it short and concise. And so I started to zero in on the shapes a little bit more precisely once I finished rendering out most of the facial features, and I left the hair for last because it is a big shape, but I wanted to approach it in a really simple way. And so I actually used the lasso tool quite a bit when I draw hair, especially when it's dark, so I don't have to do separate line work for it, and I find that to be super efficient. I should actually try to do that more often in my other work, because just having to do line art is it's like I said, I've mentioned, it's just my comfort zone doing line art for everything, and in a way it can backfire a lot of the time, because doing precise lines for everything is kind of redundant, especially when in the end it ends up being just one big shape, like for instance this hair over here. And so yeah, here in this case I decided to just use the lasso tool and then add some details here and there, and I can't say I'm super happy with how it turned out. I would probably do the highlights a little bit differently, and probably would stylize that a little more if I were to do this again. They look just a little too washed out and just spread out too far on both sides, whereas as you can see in the reference photo, they're more concentrated to one line, so it's almost like it looks more stylized in the photo somehow than it does in my painting. But yeah, that's one of the things that I would definitely change if I were to go back and do this again. I mean, I suppose I could go in and fix it, but that's not really how I approach studies. Like, once it's done, it is done, and I simply move on. So yeah, looking back on this now as well, I obviously made a lot of changes or stylistic, I don't know, calls when it comes to the shapes. And I think another thing that I would have maybe done a little bit differently is the shape of the nose. I gravitate towards a certain nose shape, and I always just tend to morph most of the noses that I draw into that one shape that I find the most appealing. So I think maybe I should have tried to be a little more true to the reference, although I still think there is a likeness there, although it's not as close as I would have liked personally. But overall, I think I am pretty happy with how the study turned out. It was definitely one of the better ones. Some of the other ones I did were not so successful, unfortunately, but that's what studies are for. It's just a learning experience. And yeah, I definitely want to do some more of these going forward in the future, because this is a great way to shake off some of the rust and just get back into the swing of things. And yeah, so that's about it. I think I've went over pretty much everything, and yeah, just this last little bit where I put in the highlight is where I think everything just really came together. So yeah, just the finishing touches at the end can really make the biggest difference with these portraits. And here's a bit of a close-up version, and yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you soon. Bye.